As toddlers, when we are growing up, our parents are constantly teaching us different rules of life to keep ourselves protected. For instance, we learn how to cross the street, but we have to look both ways before we cross the street. We learn to brush our teeth every day, at least once or twice. Who here has brushed their teeth today? Oh, thank goodness. I'm so glad to hear that. And can you all show me your smiles? Show me those pearly whites. Oh, yes, we are ready to roll. And will all of you promise me you'll brush your teeth tonight as well? Excellent. Oh, yes. So, what we're not taught, though, is how to check our mental health. We are never told what it even looks like to be depressed or anxious or have dark thoughts. We're just supposed to go with the flow, and when we have our emotions, we have our emotions. And when we have our tantrums or bad days or bad weeks or months or years, we just go with the flow as if it's our new norm. Professionals share with us that we should be checking our mental health 3 to 5 times a day. Who knew? We only brush our teeth twice a day. So, what does that even look like? Well, sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're sad. We can be glad or mad. And if you're from Chicago like I am and a sports fan, you could be happy, glad, sad, and mad all in the same 4-second play. The interesting thing is that you are keeping track of what you're feeling. I had a very difficult time during the summer of 2008, and that was when I learned I had depression. I was having the worst summer. I isolated from friends, so no one would ask me to go out by the end of summer because every time they called me to go to the pool or anywhere else, it was all about me staining a deck. So not only that, I was crying at the drop of a hat, and I was very angry and would fly off the handle at my kids and my husband. And I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was a new norm. I had 3 kids. They were 6, 5, and 5, a 6-year-old daughter, 5-year-old twin boys, and they were lovely. They're good kids, and actually on a particular day they were frolicking in the yard while the cable man was repairing our cable. And I was sitting there talking to my friend. And after the conversation, and I was explaining to her how my summer was, she leaned in and courageously she said, "Cindy, I think you might be depressed." Well, I was shocked. I didn't think I had any reason to be depressed. I had a nice husband, I had a great house, we had food on the table, clothes on our backs, and my kids are literally laughing and frolicking in the yard. I thought frolicking was only in storybooks. So what happened from there was that she asked me to promise to see my doctor as soon as possible. So I did. I went that next day and found out through a quick assessment that I had major depressive disorder. Really? Who knew, right? Again, I thought it was my norm. So I had been stretched that summer, like if you were a tight rubber band. I was stretched to the max, and at any given moment, I felt like I could snap and everything would crumble. And when I decided to try the medication, because I'd been suffering for so long, I took the medication, and 3 days later, that tight rubber band cut me some slack. And then 3 more days later, a little more slack. And 10 days later, a little more slack. And I was finally starting to feel like me again. It's hard. It's hard to figure out when we may be depressed, when we are depressed, when we're suffering through anxiety, or if we're having dark thoughts. Sometimes we don't know that they can spin out of control to suicidal ideation. Why don't we know this? Why do we not know what it looks like? Well, we're not taught life skills like crossing the street and looking both ways before we cross the street. So now we know more about mental health. We can know how to take care of ourselves. We know life skills once we learn them. So, what do these life skills look like anyway? Well, when we're not feeling good, it's a symptom, right? So, do we know what symptoms look like in depression or anxiety, or even what suicidal ideation might look like? What are the solutions that we could be doing to either take care of ourselves or reach out for help? And what in the world do we say? What do we say to ourselves when we are feeling really down and we're having a really rough week or a month or something? What do we say when we want to ask for help? Do we even know what to say? I sure didn't. And then what do we say to someone who confides in us, like I did with my friend, that I wasn't feeling good. I was really struggling. How if I'm not my friend Dawn, how am I supposed to say something to someone else who might be struggling where I see that they're struggling and they might need help in this way? We don't know. We don't have the sound bites. But I do promise when we learn the symptoms, the solutions, and the sound bites, we are so much better prepared. We're better prepared to help ourselves, we're better prepared to help our teammates, and we're better off helping our loved ones. And that's pretty important because when we are working with people and we are leaders, leaders need to know what to look for because sometimes the people on our teams are suffering and we don't even know it. We don't even know it. And as leaders, there's a lot on our plate. We're leading our teams at work. We're leading our families at home. And then we need to lead ourselves in our own lives and make sure that we are taking good care of ourselves to be able to take care of all these other people. So let's talk about the symptoms. Symptoms are varied. We could have symptoms of depression that are emotional, physical, psychological, and even spiritual. I didn't know about the spiritual part when I started learning about all this. Emotional symptoms can look like what I went through that one summer. They can also look like rage. They can look like being obsessed with something like I was, isolation, sad, unhappy. It can even affect our sex drive and make us feel less than or worthless. Not that sex would make us worthless, but you know what I mean. We could feel worthless because we're depressed. And then, unfortunately, we can end up with dark thoughts as well. In the physical part of our bodies, pain resides in our bodies. And our emotional pain definitely takes place in places of our bodies. For instance, if I'm super stressed, I will get pain in my back. Well, that could be anxiety. It could be anxiety or it could be depression. For instance, when I was getting diagnosed with the anxiety, I actually thought I had a tumor in my stomach. And I went to the doctor and we needed to update my medicine. And I said, "Oh, doctor, could you please check my stomach? I feel like there's a cement ball in the stomach." And she said, "Well, what's going on?" I said, "I don't know. For the last 2.5 weeks, I haven't been able to eat. Everything feels like I'm going to get sick. And it just feels really heavy in there. I think there's a tumor in there." She said, "Well, that was 2.5 weeks ago. What happened 3 weeks ago?" I said, "Oh, I was in this major car accident with my kids." She's like, "Oh, that's not a tumor. That's anxiety." It is? I thought it was a tumor. All right. Yay, anxiety. Of course, that's not something to really celebrate, but it was better than a tumor. So it was anxiety, and I had no idea. So we did give me a little bit of medication to help with that for a short time, and it went away. I had to process. The medication helps me process what's going on in a more realistic way. And then once I get over the anxiety and time has healed things, then I don't have to necessarily take the medication anymore for anxiety. So physical symptoms can be anywhere: back, stomach, headaches. Insomnia is very prevalent with people who have anxiety. You have trouble sleeping, and the list goes on. So the the important thing is if you're suffering with any of these pains or these emotions, that you get help after you've been suffering with it for 2 weeks or longer, because that's when it's time to get medical intervention so that you can, hopefully get back to where you were and feel more like yourself. The other area that it affects is our psychological. Obviously, psychological depression, anxiety are part of our psychological beings, and it can mess with our mind. It can mess with our focus. It could spin us off into different distractions. Procrastination could be part of that. Just being disappointed or not really being able to capture like what you're supposed to do for the day, those types of things. And spiritually, well, there you might start questioning God. You may no longer want to believe in what you believed. Your spirituality practices, whether they're religious or not religious, may shift or change. Or maybe you just doubt that there is any super higher power that is going to help you. These are all normal symptoms of what could be the cause of depression or anxiety. It could be the cause of why people change their behaviors or the way that they operate with their team members or their leaders or their clients. And these are the things to be looking out for. As I listed these lists of symptoms, were there any that struck out in your mind, either about yourself or about somebody you're working with or care about? You don't have to answer. I just want you to kind of note it and maybe jot it down, because maybe once you hear about the solutions and the sound bites, you'll know how to approach the person and help somebody out or get help for yourself.